All right, we're live. All right, so today we're going to do start this planar compositions exercise. You'll be basically making a set of digital study models based off of a set of rules and ingredients and steps, right? So it's sort of following the recipe, except instead of making cookies with our grandmothers, we're making planar compositions, as one does in Rhino. So I'm just starting up Rhino. Um, there's a couple of things. Sometimes it comes up with the window and asks like, let me just get this off my interface and move that down. All right, here we go. Oftentimes it'll come up with a little splash screen saying what kind of new template you want to use. I just let that go and let Rhino open up. So there's a couple of things I'm going to do first. One is I might change the interface a little bit here. I really don't like these grid lines. They're sort of a gray mess. They like are like visual blah for my eyeballs. Two, I'm going to toggle a few things here when it comes to ortho, planar, OSNAP, and smart track. We'll talk about what each of those are. And then three, I'm going to double check my units and make sure that I'm working for all practical purposes. If we're working in the United States, we'd be using imperial units. I think by default, Rhino sends you to millimeters. So I'm going to make sure that I'm using the right units, feet and inches, in this case, for the parameters of this exercise. Okay. All right. So um, tools, pull down options. I'm going to leave my cursor here, but this is basically where you find almost all the options on the Windows side of Rhino, if you need to customize it. On the Mac side, I think you would go to this little Apple icon and go to Preferences, and you'll see that a lot of the settings are within the Preferences box. Okay. So I might just come over to you. I know you're using the Mac version, right, Jason? Yeah. So I might come over and just double check with you and see where those settings are. But I believe they're in the Apple icon and then Preferences, and it should bring up a box. Do you need it for Rhino?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't even know my university email in the computer notes inside of.
Okay, well then here's what I will do. Let's go ahead and just watch this.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take care of that. Then I'll stop the recording and let that process. Then we can sort of take it one by one and sort of troubleshoot things. Okay, does it make sense? All right, that'll work. All right, great. And look, you're not the only person that like shit is not working. Like I came in and like there's models all over the place in front of my doorway to my office, and like there's like the screen projector wouldn't even open. Like what the hell? All right, so welcome to UNLV, I guess, moment. You're always 16 steps away from where you really need to be.
Yeah.
But we'll get you up and running this morning. All right, so tools, pull down options, and I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. I'm going to do a few things here. I'm going to go to the grid option. I'm just trying to turn my grid lines off. It's really hard for you to see the line work that I'm drawing if that's on when I'm projecting here. I've set my background to be white. Yours is probably like a muddy gray if you're just using Rhino out of the box. Tools, options again. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here on the left-hand side. You can see all these different settings. I'm going to go to units. I'm going to make sure my model units are set to, in this case, feet. Distance display, I'm going to say feet and inches. Autodesk is telling me I need to update things. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to leave the units 0.001 at tolerance. That's fine. Angle tolerance of 1 degree. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that. I'm just going to make sure that I have things set to feet and inches and hit OK. All right. Now, when it's asking me for, let's say, a distance or a length or something like that, if I just type in a number and hit enter, like 40, it's going to say, oh, 40 units, which are feet, right? So we'll be drawing in real scale, right? So when we model things virtually, we model things at the actual full scale. Then when we extract a drawing and we need to make it 8 scale or quarter scale, we scale the drawing accordingly, okay, along with the line rates. All right, so you with me so far? All right, perfect. Last thing, you'll notice over here I have things called grid snap, ortho, planar, OSNAP, smart track, gumball. Let me go ahead and toggle on planar. And I'm going to leave my O snap on, but I'll talk about that in just a few minutes when we start to draw. Okay, planar is important. What you'll notice is that by default, I have 4 sort of points. And so I have a viewport where I'm looking down in the XY plane.
Yeah.
And then I have a front view, the right view, and a perspective view. So as I draw on any of these viewports, you'll see everything update real time throughout, right? So if I'm drawing in top view, and I want to draw where the XY plane is at the z equals 0 point, and I want to keep it there and not just be drawing anywhere in the depth of space of the z, I can turn on planar, and as soon as I click on a point, then it's going to make sure that it stays on that XY if I'm drawing top. Or the XZ plane, or the Z plane, whatever, depending on which viewport I'm using. Does that make sense? All right, good. By default, I think in perspective view, it'll take that XY plane, and that'll be the planar sort of sense.
XY is just good. They show thing like we will match up with the stuff.
Yeah, so what you'll see is here's the Y axis, X axis, Z axis. 0, 0, 0 point would be right here where they all intersect. Yep. The home sort of point in the Cartesian coordinate space. All right, we ready? Whew. All right, so let's just take a look at what we're actually step by step. So we're going to learn some of the basics in drawing Rhino and surfacing Rhino, and moving some things around, rotating them around in space. So we'll draw the components, we'll make all of the ingredients, and we'll start to compose them. Excuse me. So they're learning objectives or whatever. But what I wanted to sort of say is, here are the instructions. So in just sort of plain language, right? Natural language. Set units in Rhino to feet, draw 4 40-foot by 40-foot squares. I would probably do this in top view, just to make it easy on yourself. These are your starting ingredients. Okay, then we'll take each of these and we'll draw these shapes inside. Basically to break these up into 2 parts each. Then I've taken the large parts and shaded them in gray. We'll start doing more things with these larger gray parts. First of all, you can split this one up once, split this one up twice. Doesn't matter where. Split this one up twice, but in 2 different sort of orientations, and then split this one once. Right? So now we'll have a set of pieces. That's our components. And then we'll move them around. This is an example of people doing this and students doing this with foam. So they were like manually drawing this stuff with pencil, then cutting out with X-Acto, which can be kind of expensive unless you have a bunch of experience. Board sitting around, foam cord sitting. But this is essentially what we're going to make, a composition of those planar components, right? And in doing so, what we're going to do is we're really going to focus on how do we make a set of spaces or define a set of spaces, but without just drawing a bunch of room boxes around things, right? Okay, so in other words, like a Tadao Ando or Jean Nouvel or some of those architects we saw yesterday, right? How do we begin to think about how do we define space? Do we need to have 4 walls in order to make a room? Not necessarily. Do we need to have a 3-foot by 7-foot punched opening in a wall in order to make a door or a threshold or an entrance or whatever you want to call it? No, right? We can begin to sort of maneuver very resourcefully with just the componentry that we have, right? The shapes that we have. So we might move, slide, rotate, or fold in order to make those sorts of moves. And what you can see is that, again, spaces can be defined by just a change in the height of the volume, or they can be changed by changing the ground plane, the floor plane, or they can be defined by simply a frame, right? And so we can begin to sort of have a conversation about moving these planes around, composing them in particular ways in order to make a sort of interesting sequence of spatial, how do I put this? A sequence of spaces that interlock and flow into each other in really interesting ways. All right. Now we'll start doing this, and then you'll start to make these things, and then later, after you've made them, and you've submitted them for us to take a look at next week, then we'll start to call them light vessels, and we'll start to develop them further. We'll start to turn the sun on. We can start to move the sun through the sky. and start to, we'll talk about cutting some sections through them, and or moving the camera around so we can see inside. And we'll move that sun around and start to play around with effects, and performance, right, as it relates to sun, wind, and light. So, so you'll do this 4 times. In other words, you have 4 distinct virtual models. So you'll do this once, and you'll do the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time. Each time you'll end up in a different ending place, and then we'll make some axons of those, for Tuesday. Right, here's the architecture and light, if you're interested in that. All right, so the rubric, and again, like, what you'll notice is that it's sort of scored so far as, did you do it? Was it complete or incomplete? But I did want to give you some sort of rubric on how I sort of look at these and sort of can tell like what's more successful, less successful. Spatial variety. Are there a set of spaces that begin to sort of create different volumes, and in fact have some sort of sense of interlock? The overall form or shape is interesting, right? In other words, there's not like a back or a bottom, but if I turn this around and start to look at all the sides, there's, is it maybe ambiguous as to which side is up or down? Okay. So in other words, I don't want there to be like, if here's the ground plane I make, and I sit there and when I turn it over, it's like, think about this as an object in the round. Each side needs to be sort of have potential to be usable. Right? And then following instructions. So just being able to get things done, getting things done on time, making sure you're not a day late and a dollar short. Okay. The schedule and workflow. Today, we're going to do the demonstration, initial demonstration. This will be online. We'll have the end of today, end of the morning, and then also the end of the afternoon for me to sort of filter around and help troubleshoot anything. Then Thursday will be all about work time. You're just there getting things done. I can float around and help out. We'll be online there tomorrow. That's what I said. So I just want to be consistent. But again, in Zoom, you just shout at me and I say, okay, share your screen. Let's take a look. And then I start to draw on the screen. Go, oh, it works. So we'll do that tomorrow. Now, here are a couple of other things to maybe help you if you're, sometimes you're like, oh, what do I do? Like, if I can do anything, how do I begin? So you can always take a look at several things here, right? One I would say is think about creating a threshold where I enter a large space and then eventually I end up in a small space, or reverse that. Or you can think of it as I end up in a bright space and I end up in a sort of dark, compact space, or vice versa. I get compressed and then released into a larger space. So you can always think in terms of spatial sequence or an experience of light and dark. Or you can always think about the overall shape or form, right? And you guys learned these back in little high school art class or anything? Or so some of the elements of design here, right? We just sort of boil these down really quickly. You can always play with the idea of balance or imbalance, symmetry or asymmetry, movement, rhythm, right? Does your eye stop in a certain place, or do you draw it around? Repetition versus variety. Repetition, versus variety, and then contrast, right? So you could always think about having sort of 2 halves that are sort of diametrically opposed or something like that. So the key thing is don't make this difficult. Have fun with it. Play around. You're encouraged to basically, this is structured play. You're going to fail a couple of times. If you haven't used Rhino before, it's perfectly fine. And just focus on the real fun part here. Like, how do I make, I can start to compose space and order these planes around in different ways. And I can stand inside of them like I'm there, be immersed inside the virtual model and turn the sun on. That's incredible, right? So I'm going to go through these steps quickly, and then I can go through and we can start to make sure everybody's set up for success for the rest of the week and the weekend, okay? All right. But now we kind of know where we're going, right? All right, so I'm in XY view, top view, and I'm just going to double click on that viewport, and that toggles it to fill the whole screen. Like, all those other 4 viewports are there. I can double click again, and they show back up. But if I want to take one of these and toggle it to the full screen, I can just by double clicking on the label of the viewport. All right, and then there's certain mouse movements, and I recommend you have a mouse, the 3-button mouse. when you're trying to do this stuff. Otherwise, it's really painful. You have a left button and a right button. And so when I'm just holding down the right button, I can sort of pan and move around. When I have my scroll wheel, I can zoom in and out dynamically. So anyway, let's see. Here's the toolbar on the left-hand side. Brian, you still with me? I know it might be kind of boring for somebody who's used this before, but we'll get going here. We have the sort of hierarchy of tools along the left-hand side. So we have something called points. We use points. We can use those to make curves. We can use curves to make surfaces. Okay, so points, curves, surfaces. All right, so first and foremost, I'm going to use this polyline tool. You can see that the icon literally looks like a polyline. Click that icon, and now the command line asks me to just, click a point somewhere in space to start the polyline. So I'm going to go ahead and just click. Okay, and you can see that now it just wants the next point. I can start to make polylines all day long if I wanted to. I'm just going to undo all of those. So one thing you'll notice is that really quickly, if I'm drawing some graphic shapes with right angles, it might help if I just turn the ortho lock on. I'm going to go ahead and do that down at the bottom, ortho. Now you can see I'm constrained to move in 90-degree increments. Okay, so the next point of the polyline, what I'm going to do, since I've clicked one point, I'm just going to type in the dimension of the length of the line I want, 40, and then hit enter. Now you can see I can only make a 40-foot long line. So I just have to click where I want it and then start with the next one, 40, enter. And then I just need to tell it there. And then 40, enter. There. And then I can just hit close. So I'm looking at this command line, right? Every tool here is like an algorithm. It has a certain set of inputs, a certain set of parameters. When I enter those in, points and lengths, then it starts to make line segments for me. And then I can say, just close. Let's close that up as a rectangle. Okay. Let's try it again. I'll just make another one, 40. 40. Right, so I'm using my left hand on the keyboard, my right hand on the mouse. I'm able to sort of fairly fluently, after a while, get the muscle memory down for left clicking and right clicking. Okay, so when I need to repeat the last command, because I've actually made the polyline, I can just right click and it just repeats the last command. So I can start to make another polyline. Give me just a second, Brian. I see you raising your hand. Just unmute yourself and shout at me. What do you need?
So, if I wanted to do like, I know that 40 right now is 40 inches. If I wanted to do like 40 feet, then how would I make that
Yeah,
different?
okay, so go back, turn your units to feet.
Okay.
Because we'll be working in feet and inches. So go ahead and just set your units to feet. Draw a full scale, but in feet. You'll have a much easier time. What we can then do is, let's say I went 4'6". I can type in 4-6, and that's going to translate into 4 feet and 6 inches for me. Not sure what this is doing. I thought maybe that's the wrong nomenclature. 4 foot, 6 inches. Yeah, here we go. Now I have 4'6". Okay. Okay. And then last, I mean, I've made one of these. I could easily just copy it, right? Like I'm just going to say type in copy into the command line. Select the thing I want to copy, right click to accept, and then click where I start and click where I want to end to make another copy. All right, so it looks easy. I know if you haven't used this before, it'll take a little while to develop the muscle memory. Don't worry. That's the first week is set up for you to do this, practice this a lot. All right, next, let's take a look at our toolkit here, our IKEA instructions. Now we need to draw several shapes. 4 feet down, we need to start another line. It's going to go 28 feet, then 6 feet, then 24 feet, and all the way down, right? We're going to use this to actually create these shapes, to break these larger rectangles up in smaller shapes. What I'm going to do, just to sort of keep all of this in the same space with limited screen real estate, I'm just going to move this stuff around really quickly so I can sort of see both in real time here. There we are. Now we don't have to keep toggling back and forth. All right. So really quickly, I think it's worth mentioning that I really want to be able to sort of snap to certain points that I've already drawn, right? So that's what this O snap is, called object snap. When I have it turned on, you can see that I have a set of options down here. End, near, point, mid, center, intersection, perpendicular, tangent, quad, knot, vertex, project. I'm gonna go ahead and take it to end. I'm gonna go ahead and when you see that, when I get close to an endpoint that I've already drawn, it snaps to the endpoint automatically for me, right? Which is kind of nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and snap and click. And I'm gonna say, okay, 4 feet. I'll make another line. And then let's see, 4 feet. Here we go. Click. Then let's see, 4 plus 24, 28 feet. Click. 6 feet. Click. And sorry if I feel a little mechanical here. I usually just take this stuff for granted. I'm not like trying to narrate this stuff in real time, and I'm just trying to draw some shapes. So just bear with me here. But and then I'm going to go down here to the very end. Now, I want to find where I would intersect this line, right? I can even say perpendicular to make sure that it's going to be perpendicular. Probably redundant to do that, but I'm just going to go around this shape and draw the rest of it. And say close, C for close. Okay. Now I select it. I'm just going to move this up using the gumball tool. When I select something, it gives me that gumball with the arrows. I can move it around. You can see that I have this shape, this gray shape here. Now I might just quickly ad lib here and draw this other one. I'm just snapping to endpoints. Now, what's interesting is I got to snap to a point that doesn't exist, but a hypothetical intersection between this edge and this edge. What you can see is that if I just move my cursor close to the endpoints and sort of back down, like I have this smart track option open. So it'll start to sort of find that hypothetical intersection between those edges for me. And I can then snap to it right here and then close that up. And just move this. You can see now I have the 2 shapes from that one rectangle. Okay. All right, so I'm just moving things around based on the dimensions, drawing some more shapes. Let's try this one. Okay, let's see. Snap to this point, go 4 feet down. Oh yeah, all right. And then let's see, 12 plus 20, that would be 32. And then 26 feet. And then 20 over. And then down here, I'm just going to snap to there. Click over here. Oh, wait, I went the wrong direction. Click. Oh, we'll close it up over here. There we go. Forgot which shape I was making. Oopsie. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move this one up so it's out of the way and I can see it. And then I'll just use this to make this next one. Again, I'm just going to move that one up. All right. So that's just drawing 2 shapes quickly inside these other ones. There are other ways of doing this. Yeah.
You drag up those, this is for the bottom back, you drag up those shapes and the yellow neon,
The selection.
options come up, are you holding like command or?
No, I'm just clicking.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I click on something, it's selected, it's going to turn that yellow.
Yeah.
And then this gumball comes up and I can just sort of click the arrows and move it around. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, Yeah, once you get the mouse and you start screwing around, like you'll figure out like there's certain keyboard, like so you're using the left hand, you're usually using the keyboard, right? Just like AutoCAD. Right hand, you're usually using the mouse. And once you start to roll, it becomes really quick and more intuitive. But it's a matter of your brain picking up on that muscle memory. Then you start, at a certain point, you stop thinking about the actual ins and outs, and you're really focused on what I'm trying to get done. So that's why the practice thing is really, I think, really helpful at the beginning. Um, let's do this one really quickly at the end. There's a different way of doing this, right? Like I can go over here and say, let's go 6 feet in. And I'm just going to go ahead and then start there. I'm going to click this and start making this shape. It's 32 feet. Oops. I don't know why it did that. Okay, hold on. I blame Windows, but it's really just user error when I do that. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and click. So all I've done is I've just made this shape. I'll go ahead and select this. I could use this to trim things out if I wanted to, right? So I could say, let's split this with this, right? In which case I can, let's say trim and split are right here. Okay, so these icons, one is called trim and one is called split. They're very similar. The only difference really is that when I trim, I'm selecting what to trim away, then it disappears. Versus split, I tell it what cutting tool is, and then both sides remain. I'm like, so for instance, here I can split and say, I'm going to split this, and then I'm going to use this to split it. And you can see that this still remains and this still remains. Whereas if I use trim, it says use the cutting object, this. Now select the part that I want to trim away, which would be that. And then it just disappears. Now then I have two separate curves, two separate polylines, and they're not closed. And so if I select them, then I would need to do this, join them. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you if you haven't used this before, but join and explode, right? Do the sort of two opposite things, right? If I have a polyline, I want to join it with another polyline so that they form one polyline. I can use join. If I have a polyline, I want to break it up into all of its individual line segments. I can explode them, right? So those go back and forth and they're right next to each other. Puzzle pieces coming together is join. The big explosion flash is explode. Kind of lame icons, but that's how I always remember, darn it. So I'm going to go ahead and select these both and just hit join. It says two curves join into one closed curve, which is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. And now to make this small piece, I can just, instead of using the polyline tool, I can make a rectangle. I can say this corner to that corner. And I'll just move this up and out of the way so you can see what I just drew. But there it is. So there's more than one way to do this stuff, as you can imagine. And last, I'll just do this one really quickly. Let's see, 8 feet over 16. So 8 feet and 10 feet. So I'll just go 8 feet this way, sort of draw some construction geometry, 10 feet this way. That'd be my point to start. 16 for this sort of donut hole, 20. Whoops. 20, there we go. Try to be a little more careful here and zoom in, and my mouse is falling off the mouse pad. That's why. 16 again, and then just close this thing up. Get rid of this little construction thing that I made. There we go, two of those. I also need to make a copy of this because the whole part will actually be its own little piece here too. I just deleted it. I just selected it and deleted it. Yeah, good question. I just take it for granted. So please, if questions pop up, then let me know. Okay, then I need to break these things up. All right, so we'll use that. We'll do some splitting. Okay, so I need to split this into two pieces. This one right here. And I'm just going to arbitrarily pick where I do this. I'm not going. You can, you could pick here. You could go in this direction or whatever you want. I don't specify that. That's for you to choose. But I'm just going to go ahead and draw my sort of cutting tool where I want to split things, and use the split command. I'm going to split this with this. Now this is in two separate pieces. Go ahead and get rid of that cutting tool. Just going to move these up out of the way so we can see the gap. Now I'm going to go ahead and just start making another polyline. Snap and snap to close that up. Snap and snap to close that up. And when I do that, I've drawn another line, right? So I need to sort of join these again together into one sort of closed poly. I've done. That's what I've done. When I say line and curve, Rhino treats those as two separate, or it's the same thing, right? So Rhino just refers to curves, right? Lines are curves, they just have to have no curvature, zero curvature. So lines, you think about a Venn diagram as a circle inside a larger circle of curves. Lines are basically just the shortest distance between 2 points as far as CAD's concerned. All right, so I can do the same thing here and here and here. But I'm just going to move on, right? I'm going to show you guys what's next. Okay. So I have 15 parts. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and surface these. I've made sure that they're closed. They're joined together. Right. I have this one and that one. I haven't split these up, but I'll just skip that for now, just because I want to do the rest of this. All right. So I have points, and I have ways to draw curves. Now I have ways to draw surfaces. There's the tool right there. That's how I make surfaces. If I click and hold, you can see that inside of this, I have a bunch of different ways to make surfaces. From points and from curves, I can loft things together. I can sweep things, extrude things. But this one right here, surface from planar curves. If I have a closed polygon, I can fill in the inside of this. That's exactly what I want to use.
What is loft? Like lofting together.
Loft is fun. We'll actually do that later. Loft is if you draw several section curves. Okay. Sensors on the light bulbs, I guess. Well, it makes sense if you don't want to waste energy and nobody turns off the light switch. Sorry, the lights just went out. So, loft is if you draw several sort of curves in elevation that become like sort of sectional profiles, then it skins in between them. So it's like lofting in the boat building industry was taking a complex geometry of a hull and finding the sections for the ribs, the structural ribs. And this is the reverse. We start with the sections, and then we use the sections to build or skin a complex shape. So that's what loft does. Okay, did that help? Let me just show you what that does, what that means. I'm going to go into front view, and I'm just going to draw maybe a couple of. Let me turn off ortho, snap here, rock. Oh, come on. Sorry, my Rhino is like looking a little silly. I'll just draw a couple of curves. I'll also draw a couple of, let me turn on the ortho again. That's a good question. He's asking, like, there's a lot of different ways of building surfaces. What is loft? So I'll just talk about this just for a moment, because this demonstrates, I think, quite nicely how different ways you can make surfaces from curves. Let's just make a copy of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start selecting, try to anyway. I'm just going to make this thing vary. I'm just going to move these points down. I thought I selected both at once, but apparently I didn't. That's annoying. Just going to make this a slightly different curve. Right, so you can see that the curves are made up of points. Yeah, here we go. Move them both at once. Right, so I'm just going to loft in between these things. Here I'll do loft, and I'll loft between this and this. You can see I get basically it skins in between those curves, those sections. Of course, I can do more than just one. So copy this one over. right? I can start to, again, it just sort of fitting a surface, skinning from here to here to here. Same thing with polylines. I mean, it still works. Kind of strange, oddly, right? So that's what loft does. It's a fun one. Extrude is another one that's pretty common. Let's see, extrude is just what you would imagine. Take the profile in a direction and it just extrudes it out along that direction. Okie doke. Does that help a little bit? We'll start talking more about some of these tools because we will use them. But for now, I just want to sort of fill in some planar surfaces. So that's what this tool is for. It's called Planar Surf if you're just typing it into the command line, but it's this icon right here. And it shows basically a poly curve, and then also shows an inner poly curve. So you can actually make surfaces with holes inside if you need to, which is really helpful when we have a donut like this. All right, so I'm just going to select it. Command line says select planar curves to the surface. So I'll say okay. Here's one. All right. I'll repeat the last command by right-clicking. There's one. Now you can see that it's filling this in with the surface that's actually being quickly shaded with gray color. Let's do that one. Now let's do this one. This is why I didn't want to cut this one up yet. I just wanted to show you. If I click a closed curve, and it's on the same plane with another closed curve that's inside and completely contained, it can read inside and out and give you a surface with a hole in it. Otherwise, we'd have to make the big surface and then make the small, and then trim it. Yeah. All right. So now we have a set of surface planes, right? Like we have a set of components that they're only paper thin. They have no thickness yet, but they're set up to be around for planes. So at this point, right, I'm going to move and rotate these around to start to compose something within a 40-foot by 40-foot by 20-foot volume. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually draw that sort of build volume from the workbook thing. And then I'm going to start moving things around inside of it and through it. Okay. So in this case, I can build a box that works. First corner of the base is over here. Now, I don't know where this corner is, and consequently, I don't know what 40 feet next to it is. So I'm going to do this a different way. I'm just going to go ahead and do the way we were doing before. Well, I'll just draw the profile, the footprint. So I'll say 20 feet by 40 feet, and it's going to be 40 feet tall. 20 feet. And close, all right? Now I want to turn this into a block, right? So one thing I can do is extrude this. So I have this shape, I can extrude it up 40 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and use the extrude command. Again, I have my surface creation tools. I got here by clicking and holding until the larger menu came out. And I'm going to pull it off here and leave this up for a while. And so you can see that I have things like surface from points, right? Surface from planar curves. We just used that one. Loft and from edge curves. This extrude straight's really handy. I'm going to go ahead and select this. By default, it's going to say, oh, the shape's on the XY plane, so the Z is going to be the default axis to extrude through, the perpendicular sort of normal direction. And then it's going to ask the extrusion distance. How far do we want to extrude? That's going to be 40, right? 40. You can see, we don't have a top and a bottom. And I do kind of want a top and a bottom, let's say. So I'm just going to undo that really quickly. And let's take a look at, I'm just going to repeat the command. You can see it's asking me for the extrusion distance, but you'll see that there's a number of parameters here. So I could say solid, turn it into a solid. Yes. Now it's going to cap the bottom and top for me when I put this in 40. Okay. And it's not necessarily intuitive. Like you wouldn't necessarily guess that. But it comes with a little bit of experience, getting used to reading that command line or looking at the parameters involved to sort of see what your options are. Okay. So now it's about arranging these things inside of this thing. Now, you see the viewport label. We can double click and again toggle back and forth. I'm just going to toggle perspective back. And then I'm going to say, click this little arrow, or I can right click on the label You both do the same thing. It brings up this menu. And right now we're just under the sort of dumb shaded view. What I can turn this to is either ghosted or X-rayed. Now I can start to see through things translucently, right? So that's actually helpful if I want to work within this solid.
Where is that?
I can start to see it. Yeah, great question. So when I go to the viewport label, any viewport, some of them are by default set to wireframe, some are shaded or rendered. So let me just show you what these things look like really quickly while I'm recording. So this is what wireframe looks like, no shade. Shaded is just basic flat shading. Rendered sets everything to this sort of white plaster, white clay model sort of thing with some soft shadows. Ghosted is that you can sort of see through things. X-ray is kind of like ghosted, but slightly different, sort of flat shading, I think. Technical, and we'll actually start to use these viewport settings and start to customize them because we can start to play around with the line weights, the line types, and stuff like that, line widths, and start to make our own display modes for like drawings that are like so. But this one you can see has hidden line as a dash. And later on we can turn that. We can also give it line weights around the edges and things like that, so we can really make these drawings pop. Artistic. There's a series of them here. I'm just going to turn this back to ghosted so we can sort of see inside. And now I have several different ways of thinking about this, right? So when I select these things, you can see the gumball picks up or pops up, I guess, shown. You can see that I have an x-axis, a y-axis, a z-axis, as arrows, and I can move these things in those directions only, constrain them to that. So I can move things around that way. You can also see that I have these rotating things as part of the gumball. So I can just quickly, since I have ortho snapped on, see my ortho down at the bottom is toggled on. I can move these in rotate these in 90-degree increments, depending on which axis I decide to rotate them, right? So you can use the gumball tools to rotate and move. Or you can type in move or rotate, right? And so I could say type in move as a command, click and what I want to move, and then tell it where I'm moving from and then where I want to move to. So if I need to snap to something really precisely, let's say I want to make sure that this corner, I want to say it's not going to really work too well, but let's just snap to that corner, right? Then I can do that. So I can be really precise using the move command and click and then click, move from to move to, and start to use my snaps to be precise, right? Now that's a problem for me because now that's out of my bounding box. Yeah, so this is the original curve. And what we did is we made a surface inside of it, but we still have the original curve as well. And that brings up another thing that maybe I can talk about tomorrow, but these layers, right? You can start to separate things on layers and turn them on or off. So you can keep that old geometry in case you need to revert back to it. You know? But that's essentially it. So now I can start to move things. Let's say I want to rotate something very precisely. Let's say I want to rotate this downwards. I can go to the right viewport and I can say rotate. I'm going to type in rotate. And come on, Rhino, what's going on here? Did it go back on your screen? It's back on my screen. Pause.
Yeah, it went Windows 10 pause.
Yeah. I don't know what. Hello, Earth to Windows. Did I hit some sort of magic button sequence that like sign in? Yeah, sign in. What the hell? Why did? All right. Well, anyway, so back to what I was going to say. Right. Let's say I want to rotate this along this axis downwards. Right. I can go to the viewport where I can sort of be on axis, and I can type in. Okay, here we go. I started typing rotate. Rotate. Center of rotation. I click that point. Then angle or first reference point. So I can say reference point, and I can move it. And without ortho, I can start to move it around. If I want to constrain it to 90-degree increments, I can move it around. Or I can just say, there's the center of rotation. I can type in 90 degrees. Let's see. Yeah, and then it's 90 degrees in the wrong direction. So I'd say 270 instead of 90 or something like that. But I can start to rotate things more precisely. Okay. So move and rotate, you can use the gumball, or you can actually type in commands and start into very precise snaps and angles, other sort of parameters involved. Okay. So that's more or less it in a nutshell. Now that I'd move this around, gosh, come on. Rhino, what are you doing to me here? My computer's telling me it's time to move on here, I guess. Let's see, I want to move this, select it. Okay, and then I say move from, and I select that corner. And maybe I turn on my mid. I'm just going to move this around a little bit. Maybe I want to put it right there. Oh yeah, look at that. Boy, that's beautiful. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Is the mid what allowed you to put it inside of
Well,
that one?
let me snap to the midpoint of this edge.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And if you're trying to snap to the center of a circle, center points, or to either 12, 3, 6, or 9 on a circle in the clock quads. So yeah, you can sort of play around with these snaps and sort of see how they work, right? As you draw and as you model, move and things around. Okay. So from here, I'm sort of making these compositions. Let me just open up like an example one. It's like a cooking show. I'll sort of show you what these look like, right? Hopefully, let's see. Summer sitemap, planar composition. Maybe I have maybe I don't. 2023. 2024. 2021. Like, help me out here, computer. Floor plan, demo, north arrow, and scale. Usually I have a couple of these. Oh, here's a demo. Yeah, 229, 836K. Let's try this one. It's a little bigger. Hey. Too many files on my laptop here. I need to restart my machine. It occurred to me this morning when I was dragging stuff over, trying to back some things up on Google Drive, that I haven't like restarted my laptop in like 6 months. So it probably has some memory leaks. I need to just reboot it basically so it runs a little more efficiently. Clears out its memory. Sometime today. So yours might look something along the lines of this. Now, tomorrow I'll talk about how to sort of thicken things up. We'll extrude things or offset them with some thickness. But then we can start to get inside and we can start to turn on shadows and the sun. We can start to, this thing is floating right now. It makes absolutely no sense relative to the ground because I could turn this over and think maybe right is actually up or, and then, again, start moving the sun around to start to see what I have, right? See where I'm blocking sun, where I'm letting it through, what kinds of interesting framing of views or the sky, or what kinds of interesting sort of volumes I have inside of here. But this is kind of like chaotic, right? Like this is the starting point, just simply moving things around. We'll have time 2 weeks for the next 2 weeks, cleaning this thing up, simplifying, really trying to make things, I don't know why it's positive, trying to make sure that it's clear, like what are our intentions and how do we clean this thing up and start to make it into just a little piece of architecture. And that piece of architecture then can be duplicated and then varied, right, as a series of bays on the site. So, and we have a linear site. And these things are 40 feet deep, 20 feet wide, 40 feet tall. So you'll have opportunities for south exposure, some east and west exposure. I'll have lots of ins and outs, and then a lot of top lighting opportunities as well, to sort of play around and experiment. And then we'll be very rational with the sort of bones of the building, holding these things up and creating a lobby and an entrance and circulation and cores and things like that. So it's sort of scaffolded in a way where we can really sort of design something small but really nicely But at the same time, you can make the sort of big strategic moves, just make some really sound ones. You get that stuff sort of nailed down. You don't have to worry about it. In Revit, we can start to then say this is steel and it's W section that's W22 by 44 or something, and it'll size all this stuff out for us, and it'll look nice, and we'll start to think about this stuff a little more systematically and parametrically. Right? So I don't know what this computer is doing to me. It keeps logging me out. I don't know why. Again, I like to blame Windows, but it's probably just me. I actually worked with Microsoft on some things, and the most annoying thing about working with Microsoft is that they insisted on not using Zoom, but using Microsoft Teams, like video chats. So it's such a pain. But anyway, I don't like to throw them under the bus. They actually paid really well. They paid for my Hawaiian vacation last summer, and so. But you can see that there's some redundancy here. I would start to clean this thing up afterwards. You don't necessarily have to worry about that. Think about how you start to compose these things and trying to get inside a little bit. So sort of trying to place yourself as somebody inside of these things. So what you can see is in perspective view, I can right click to sort of tilt my view and put myself in. I can start to zoom around and in. Oops. You can see that I have a really blank wall there. That's not very interesting. I don't know if I was thinking that could be maybe the start of something that could be copied over here and be structural. But if I move this, let's say towards the center. Come on now. Then it could act as like, let's say, some sort of masonry bearing wall, things framing out of it. It'd be massive cantilever, but these things would be much thicker, the floors. So I'll just show you here for a second where I'm getting this sun stuff, but I can keep showing that, right? It's not necessarily something you have to do right away. If I go to, I think I have the sun actually toggled on. So if I click on this over here, it should bring it up on this box. And I can always look at yours and we can make sure that we have certain things toggled on over here so you can pull them up. It'll hopefully replace the layers. So what we'll do is it'll give us a map where we enter in our geographic location so it understands what latitude we're at. So we can have manual control and we can move the azimuth around, or I can turn that off and I can give it, hold on, I don't know what, this is being so slow right now. I basically need to reboot my machine. Sorry about that. So I can move it around as I want, or I can say, turn off the manual control and it should give me, it should not take this long at all. It should be like instant. But it'll give me a map and I can type in Las Vegas. It'll say Las Vegas, Nevada, New Mexico or Nevada. And I'll be like, Las Vegas, New Mexico. Who the hell has ever heard of that? Yeah, so you can tell I've done this before multiple times in front of people. So I can say Las Vegas sometime today. Yeah, this is just being impossible. I don't know why. Yeah, there we go. Las Vegas, Nevada. And so once it knows our latitude, it's fairly simple math for the computer to do. So you can specify the year, month, day, and time, and whether it's daylight savings or not. Yeah, and it'll move around. I'll show you guys this in Revit. You can turn the sun on. It actually shows you the sun path. You can sort of talk about or determine and do a sun study where it animates it and then sort of the shading isn't so good in Revit out of the box, not quite like Rhino. So that modeling this is hard to do in Revit. We can do it in Rhino and then bring it into Revit. Yeah. Right? You have to link it in Revit even, and then play around with it in Rhino more, and then open up the Revit file and see changes. When it comes to like, let's say, making a grid, putting that side in, putting up steel, starting to arrange stairs, ramps, things like that, that's Revit's superpower, man. It just loves like saying, oh, you're going to make a floor. Well, is it like 8-inch concrete on a 3-inch metal deck, and blah 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 blah, right? It just wants to sort of help you solve
Those
the,
are
it
materials,
wants all the
right?
pull downs, right? Yeah, it wants,
So you can tell the vendor, hey, man, I've gotta have your materials.
it can tie into specifications.
And then you just say, this is the brand.
Yeah.
This is the thing.
It can tie into your tags on your CDs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet, that's all.
So that's the building information modeling side of things. So modeling geometry, Rhino.
Yeah.
Making sure that everything's a big database that can be cross-checked and queried, and they can extract the drawings from. That's Revit.
You know how much of each thing you need. Right?
It certainly helped. In fact, one of the students I taught last summer was a cost estimator at one of the GCs here in town. I can't remember which one for some reason offhand, but he did interiors and architecture in the UK and then in Chicago in a past life. He was like, I should get my professional degree. So he's entered the program now, but he was taking this class in this last summer. But he could tell you all about it, I'm sure. He works at which one here in town? I can't remember. It's going to drive me crazy. Well, with that, let me go ahead and turn off the recording for today so that Zoom can start to process that so I can upload it. Pause, stop recording.